I've got Mamoloko Kubayi in studio with us now, who is the head of the ANC's Economic Transformation Subcommittee, also the Minister of Human Settlements. Minister, thank you so much for making time. Good morning.
Good morning to you, Clement, and to your viewers at home.
How is the organizational report going in there? Yesterday, the President's political report was about 31 pages, spoke for over 2 hours. What are we looking at in terms of this organization?
It's going to be a bit longer. Remember, the organizational report is about everything. Our program of action, how we've done, report of subcommittees, more summarized though, report of subcommittees, the state of the alliance, the leaks, the performances in provinces, taking account in terms of our performance in elections. So it's the whole 5 years of what we have done. So the Deputy President will still be on the podium for some time.
Okay. So constitutional amendments, as part of day one of the program, that was part of what was supposed to be discussed on day one. I'm not sure if the discussion has already taken place, but I didn't hear Pulemabe mention that that will be part of the today. Do you know when the constitutional amendments, those deliberations
based
going
on the
to take place?
Based on the program, they are done before the nominations and elections of the officials, because any amendment to that needs to come in first and either be adopted or rejected so that it can be factored in. So it will definitely come today.
Okay. Let's look at one of those constitutional amendments which will be part of the discussion here. The issue of gender parity. It's something that you've been passionate about even throughout your campaigns. You've spoken openly about how there's a need to have a 50% female representation in the top 6. At some point I said to you, you are being ambitious. But I see a lot of your comrades here are saying that's what we want to push and support. Do you think that's going to take off?
Look, in terms of the amendments, I think many of us, we can take responsibility that we were not sharp enough to make sure that it's on the amendments, because the amendments of the Constitution have timelines.
Yeah.
So they need to have been particular. I think it's 3 months, if I'm not mistaken. You make those, you send them to the branches. They are reflected upon before they come here. So already on the amendment for 50% in the top 6, we've missed that vote. So we can only appeal to delegates to be able to effect that. What will come in, which is part of the constitutional amendment, is the second DSG. Which is already in the Constitution. So we're hoping that in that context will do. But I am encouraged, it's not only women, even some of the men comrades are standing up to say, you know, we've got to be able to try and find a way of reflecting a gender parity as an organization, not so many years in line. But it's not easy. I mean, you hear that sentiment in the discussion from, you know, people saying it. But when you look at the names and the slates that are moving around, or you hear of the discussions, you still feel that it's not really taken over, you know, and that's why the Women's League, I was happy to see the Women's League even issuing posters about rebel, you know. It tells you that it has to be done. I think for me is that if we could come out of this conference with lesser or just the DSG positions, whether it's first DSG and second DSG being women, it will be an indictment on us. And I think we continue to call on delegates now, and we'll do it even in plenary, to call on delegates' consciousness to be able to remember that this is a society that has more than 60% being women, and this organization can't continue like this.
Is there more that as the NEC you could have done to try and guide the delegates on how to be more deliberate about this gender transformation? Because it's not like there are no female leaders in the ANC that are capable, that have political pedigree, they've been on the ground. They are there. And if you are not forcing it on them, and sometimes we've got to be honest, even in this country, if you wanna see transformation, if you leave it to corporate South Africa, they're not going to do it. You need legislation. Is this where the NEC has perhaps failed in prioritizing gender parity and pushing for the branches to be more deliberate in ensuring women are represented?
No, definitely. I think that's why I'm talking about the constitutional amendment, because that's the basis. We do have a constitutional clause that speaks about the entirety of the structures. For example, in terms of the NEC has to have 50%, but it doesn't speak to the top 6 or top 7 that we are about if the constitutional amendment is there. And I think that's where we could have had that amendment for this conference to adopt it so that we can see it. Now, with failure to do that, it means that we're relying on consciousness, which, as you say, it's never an easy thing. It's never agreed upon, especially in a contested environment like this one. It's never agreed upon. And the second issue, for example, the guidelines attempted, where you had the issue of the representation we will hear with the delegates, and I'm hoping that that has been affected actually, in terms of making sure that the representation of people who are in conference, there's a parity in terms of gender. We had proposed as the NEC, as zebra stripe, to say in delegates where you must make sure that the female delegates more in terms of conference, or 50%. So we'll hear with the credentials. I hope that is effective because we've not had the credentials. And the other area was a 2-stage voting system, which you'd have had in the report that, and you'd have looked at the program, it has been abandoned. It's a sad thing. We thought it could assist in the nomination, because if you voted for the other 4, and then later you'd force the others to be fully in terms of voting for women. Yeah. Now, the abandonment of that, which will have to be taken again into plenary, it's sad, regression that I'm seeing in terms of the elections. Would have helped to push for gender representation, but it was then considered that no, if you have more of this voting rather than discussions of policies, it will take time. But we still do believe as women in this conference that that part as well is quite critical, ensuring that there's women leadership, because you can't have decision-making committees or platforms, but the voice of women is lesser or is missing. Yeah. And that's what is worrying some of us at this conference.
Let's talk about your campaign now. Have you thrown in the towel, or are you still running?
Look, having not met the threshold was a setback. But I think from where I'm sitting, we've literally started something that was new in the organization. We've literally challenged the status quo. Many who are conservative found us, understand I'm called a rebel now. I've earned a title of being called a rebel. It's not a bad thing. I said to somebody, I wear it with pride. It's not a bad thing if I'm recognized as a rebel. It's because it means I've challenged the status quo. And I do believe going forward, it has laid a foundation for more younger women to have bravery to stand and say, I can do it. Whether I get nominated on the floor, it's still a matter of discussion. There are still delegates who believe that I should be nominated on the floor. Look, a floor, as I said, is not something that you take for easy. You need 1,200 delegates to support you. Currently, quite frankly, I don't think I have that 1,200 as we speak, unless somebody else comes in and say in the last minutes that we do have. But where I'm sitting, I don't think that 1.2 has been sufficiently covered.
Yeah. Lessons during the campaign, that running your own campaign, that you've learned?
Look, I don't regret the approach I took. If given an opportunity, I'll do it again, and I do believe that I'll do it again. Lessons learned around coordination, more being open. I think one time you also said to me, people are out there and you are being conservative. I remember that interview quite well.
Very conservative.
Quite very well.
Because
one of the lessons.
Thing about the culture of the ANC is, it's almost like men are allowed to come out and say, yeah, I'm running for this. But as a woman, the minute you come out of that shell, their names, that's why they call you then a rebel.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Lessons learned, that if you want to challenge patriarchy, you can't play by its rules. So we started playing by the rules of patriarchy, and I realized it's not working. By the time we turned around, it was too late. And also around influencing the way the rules are put will be quite critical. But more again, for me, is that influence both internally and outside is important, critical. Again, being conservative, issues around how and which will contribute to the NC, how campaigns are run and the resources. When you are a woman, you have no backing. It's difficult. I can tell you that. Coordinating people, looking for support, business just don't believe in women leadership. I can tell you that in political cycle. That was a lesson that I learned as well. So in the forefront, as we were running the campaign, people will say we need to gather people so that we can sell the idea. You couldn't bring them together because there were no resources. So people just that in the organization to create a platform for women to be able to do. I mean, some of the people who look at what SWAPO does, SWAPO organizationally, they put the structures in place to say, okay, these are branches, you come and talk to them as candidates. And that's why they could elect women leaders. So there are lessons out there that we can learn, that you don't leave the person vulnerable on their own, having to look for fundraising and it doesn't come. And that's why I'll never support constitutional voting, even in South Africa. I've learned it here, that there isn't business that is ready to support women financially currently.
That's such a sad reality. It really is. I want to get your thoughts quickly on the discussions around policy, because this is a national conference. It's not just an elective conference. And I was a little bit worried yesterday when the adjournment happened, because then that means you are now running short in terms of the program. You have to try and put everything together. Is that not going to compromise on the key, especially policy discussions, because there are issues that this country is facing, and as the governing party you can't compromise on having key conversations that will come up with resolutions that ultimately are an answer to the pressing issues that this country is facing?
No, I don't think there will be compromise. Remember, we've had quite a huge session just on policy. Now, after the policy conference, what we did, because remember there were policy proposals at that time, so to say this is where we're looking. Inputs were made at that time as well. And then we asked provinces to go and consider our inputs. Quite a number have even made submission, written submission. I mean, Parliament Caucus has made formal submission based on their experiences as parliamentarians to say these are the loopholes, these are the gaps, these are the challenges. Civil society has made. So here we are already consolidating to say what has come out of everybody. This is what we now have. Can we go and adopt it? So we're almost at the tail end of it. So I'm not worried even from economic transformation point of view. We do have substantive submissions that we have, is to be able to get delegates to say, are these the policies that you're agreeing that we should adopt as conference?
Are there big sort of policy decisions that we should look out for, particularly those that pertain to the economic transformation?
Look, remember from ANC, we've always said, I mean, I was meeting with the Veterans League and quite seasoned comrades sitting there. And we're saying, majority of the challenges is not around policy. We've got good policies. We just have to implement it. And more explaining in how we take these decisions to delegates. So around just transition and transitioning from high carbon to low, will be one of the areas that we'll extensively get into. I know Minister Mandasho, quite a national chairperson, but in his capacity as minister, will be hosting the breakfast tomorrow and dealing with some of the issues. But in the commission, we'll focus on that. We'll deal with the issues around how we transition to digital economy as well. Those are the big issues. And still then reaffirmation of the economic reconstruction and recovery plan. So energy security, I know it will be a hot issue in terms of the debate.
The load shedding.
Load shedding and all issues, and the changes around there of leadership and others. I mean, delegates have been quite vocal about that, even from the NEC point of view. So those are some of the things that we'll be able to. Unemployment is worrying South Africans. Yes, we've seen the Q3 reports that show that we are going back to at least pre-pandemic levels, but also the increase in terms of employment. But if we can solve this, it tells you that if we can just sustain or stabilize our energy, then it means we'll have more progress, we'll have more growth, we'll have more employment. And that's why the paying attention to that is important. The network industries are critical as well. What we are doing around the state-owned entities, Transnet, which is a key enabler for us in terms of import and export, that revenue that we are losing in that area could contribute more largely in terms of our economy. So there's quite a lot of issues that we can do. But for me, again, the role, reclaiming our role in terms of our economy on the continent. I think we're losing that, and we would want to bring that quite strongly in this conference.
Yeah, Minister, we're out of time, but I have to ask you this. When you saw the president being heckled and booed yesterday, I know you've made it clear you will be voting for him. Do you think that his candidacy is somehow in question now, and that this somehow sends a picture of how he may not have a stronger chance like initially thought?
I think it's more stronger, actually. Look, it's unfortunate what happened. It was specifically, I think all of us could see the KZN delegation. It's not all delegations. I do believe that we should find a better way of voicing our unhappiness in the manner that it was done is uncalled for, and it must be condemned. We can't accept that. Even if people are not happy with him, they must go to the ballot. If they don't want him, they must go and experience that or express that in the ballot, which I don't think we will find more resonant, because majority of the delegates are supporting his second term for stability of the ANC and stability of this country.
All right, Mamoloko Kubayi, thank you so much for making time for us. She has to go back into the plenary. That's where the organizational report is being delivered by the Deputy President, David Mabuza. So day 2 of this conference has kicked off. There are several reports that are expected. The financial report will come up. There'll be a debate and adoption of those reports. They'll discuss the rules, the credentials as well, and of course, the opening session will be around nominations, and then that's when voting for the leaders is going to begin. That's where we're going to leave it here at Nasrec. We will continue giving you the latest as to what is progressing here in Soweto. Stay with us here on Newzroom Afrika.